Hello and welcome to a video that helps to introduce you to the Making of America topic and hopefully jog some memories and helps you to revise for your GCSE. The Making of America topic is on paper 2 of your exam and is actually 20% of your final grade. You're going to look at several different topics in the Making of America, and I have kindly made videos for each of these topics for you as well. So we're going to look at America's expansion, we're going to look at visions of the West, the Civil War and Reconstruction, settlement and conflict on the plains, and finally we're going to look at American culture. The exam is very similar questions to public health. So you will have 3 1 markers and you'll have a 9 marker and 10 marker. So your 9 marker, remember, is a write and organise summary of something related to one of the topics we've studied, and then a 10 marker, which is an explanation question. So explain why or why does. And both of these require 3 paragraphs, and the 9 marker takes you about 10 minutes and the 10 marker about 12. Final question that you will do on the America paper is an 18-mark judgment question. So it's how far do you agree with this statement, and it will take you around about 25 minutes to do that answer. Before you do your exam, we will do lots of practice of this type of answer, and I'm sure you've already had lots of practice doing. So the topic itself is called the Making of America. So what we're actually looking at is the formation and making of a new country. Now we know in the past that America had existed, it had lots of natives living there, the Aztecs lived in America, in the Americas too, but we're going to be looking at when white men settled there and made it the country that we recognise more so today. So when we look at the Making of America, we're going to be looking not only at the events that happened when making this new country from 1789 onwards, we are also going to be looking at the impact this had on people that were already living there, people that were forced to live there, and the new settlers. So we're going to be looking at the natives, or the Indians, the white Americans, and our white Americans could also be categorised into rich and poor white Americans, because there was quite a disparity between the experiences of those two groups of people. And finally, Black Americans, who primarily are slaves until towards the end of the time period. So those are our 3 groups of people. So running alongside the narrative of what happened in the Making of America, we're also going to be thinking about these experiences and also thinking about the narrative that follows the experiences of like the natives, for example. So how is their story of the Making of America different to, say, the Black Americans or the white Americans? So our course starts in 1789, and it starts with the Making of America from this point onwards. As I've said, America had existed before then and had been discovered several hundred years before then as well. It was made up of 13 states, and in 1789 they elected their first president. Hopefully you recognise who that is. That is George Washington. And you can see there the 13 states that make up the original states of America. And these, today, you will recognise lots of them, hopefully from the map on there. At this point, being a US citizen actually meant being white. It also meant owning property. But if you own property, then you were able to vote. So it was all to do with ownership of land. Indians and Black Americans, they weren't allowed to be citizens. Indians, hopefully we know, had a very different approach to land and ownership of land, and Black Americans were treated as slaves, and therefore they weren't able to own any land themselves. They were themselves a piece of property. Women at this time also could not vote. Even at this early stage then of the USA, it was quite divided, not just between these 3 people, as I've said, between rich and poor white Americans as well. And they were often quite divided over several issues. So they were divided over slavery, whether they agreed with it or not, the economy, and their ways of life. We know one of the big differences in the ways of life is between the Indians and the white Americans and how they viewed land, for example. The people in the northern states, they were generally against slavery, and we know later on this becomes a problem, which potentially is one of the causes for a civil war. And they also believed in a modern business and industry, whereas people in the southern states generally, they were farmers, they had plantations, and was their way of life and how they made their money. Both sides were particularly Christian as well, so that's a similarity that white Americans had in the North and the South. So many early presidents, such as George Washington, saw their role in this early stages of this new country as trying to keep both sides of the country or the territories equal and calm and balanced. So we've got George Washington, he's got this new country, he's wanting to make it work, he's wanting to keep peace, he's wanting to have balance between these three different groups of people. What does he do? Well, he gets some advisors, he gets these founding fathers, and these founding fathers, they try to come up with a system of government. So imagine, brand new country, no system of government, and this is what they come up with. So they've got the Constitution, which is rules in which everyone must follow. These are amended several times. There's the 13th and 14th Amendments, particularly important for our course. We've then got Congress. So these are groups of people which are elected from each state. As we know, states grow in numbers throughout our course. The Supreme Court, that is the highest court, has 9 judges who decide where the new laws fit in with the Constitution. So they're constantly checking with these original set of laws, the Constitution, whether anything new can be added or make sure we're actually, not breaking any of those laws. States, they're areas that have their own government. They are led by an elected governor, and they are also represented in Congress, which I've already discussed. You've then got the president. The president is the head of the state, and he looks after the whole country. The example we've been looking at is George Washington. They were elected for 4 years, that still happens now, and they can make laws or block laws. So very, very powerful. Territories, these are areas of lands that are not big enough to be a state yet, but in the future more than likely will become a state, and they are run by a territorial governor. So they haven't got a representative in Congress at this time. That's quite important in terms of their political power. And then the people we've looked at already. The people are a mixture of white Americans, Black Americans, and Native Americans. The white Americans actually descend from Europe, they are early settlers from Europe. The Native Americans at this time would have been called Plains Indians. It's okay for us to say that. And Black Americans were brought from Africa as slaves to work on plantations. Well done for watching the introduction to the Making of America video. I hope you found that useful just to get a bit of an overview of the topic and have a look at some of the skills that are required for the paper. The next video is going to be about early tensions due to westward expansion.